Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. As many of you know who follow me, I really enjoy telling you a little bit about some fascinating companies that I come across. And I came across a really quite an interesting one and a really articulate, knowledgeable CEO a little while ago. His name is John Pasquale, and he Passalacqua, right? Passalacqua, I apologize.
Got it.
He is the CEO of a company by the name of First Phosphate. And what they're doing is they're launching a mine in Quebec to mine phosphate, but to use it in the lithium battery space. And it's really kind of an interesting model that they're exploiting. And there's been a couple of articles that people may have read of other companies that are doing similar things in Quebec and the growth of batteries and the growth of lithium. And so I wanted to invite John onto the show and tell us a little bit about him, his company, and the lithium battery opportunity and phosphate as a potential use for it. Welcome, sir, to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
So let's start at like 30 or 60,000 feet up in the air. Tell me a little bit about phosphate and lithium batteries. Why is this an opportunity that people should be interested in?
Well, I mean, phosphate and lithium batteries, there are many different types of lithium batteries. Phosphate is one type of what is called a lithium ion battery. You might have heard speak of, NMC batteries, nickel, manganese, cobalt, nickel, cobalt, cobalt, and aluminum. Lithium iron phosphate battery, LFP, as it's called, is lithium, but instead of having the nickel, the manganese, and the cobalt, it's iron and phosphate, which are two more readily available materials. And so the cost of this battery is about a third to a half of the cost of the traditional NMC batteries.
A cost of a half to a third of the traditional batteries.
Yeah, when I say that, I mean the cathode active material, right? So a battery has an anode and a cathode. So the cathode material, the material that goes into the cathode, which is the more plentiful side of the battery, I mean, that gets quite expensive. So to a manufacturer, the cost savings of a lithium iron phosphate cathode is about 50% to 66% cheaper than what a traditional nickel, manganese, cobalt, or other chemistry would be. So that's the big interest here with these batteries.
And is including lithium phosphate something that people are just doing now, or has this always been a possibility?
Well, this is an extremely interesting story, actually. Lithium iron phosphate batteries have been around for over 20 years. And guess who had the patent? It was Canada. It was Quebec.
Really?
Yes. So the patent was owned by Hydro-Quebec, Université de Montréal, and a French research center. And what happened is they were selling this patent, but they were selling it, you had to pay for it ahead of time. So you'd have to pay $10-20 million upfront in most cases to be able to even, produce the material. So that deterred a lot of people in the West from doing it. It didn't deter them in China. A lot of it was done by contraband. And so the battery really took off in China. And then the patents just expired in 2022. So now the rest of the Western world can hop back on it without having to pay the patents on it. But at the same time, the Chinese did whether it was right or wrong, obviously to infringe patents, it's not never right, but they did a wonderful job in developing the chemistry and proving it out. And so the chemistry is valid. Almost 100% of these batteries are still made in China. And now everybody in the West is trying to figure out how to make it over here.
Sounds like there might be an interesting story in Hydro-Quebec overpricing the cost of their use of their patent dramatically and stymieing exploitation and growth of that market.
Well, there's a lot of reasons around it. I hate to put the focus anywhere and to point the finger anywhere, but for one reason or another, that's what ended up happening. There was a company called Johnson Matthey. It used to be called Phosphate. This was in Montreal. And they actually developed, I guess, a way of producing it, but they weren't as effective as the Chinese. The Chinese really took it over, and specifically a few Chinese companies really developed it. But there's many companies in China that are producing it. The only problem is obviously it's produced through, very environmentally challenging type of methods over there, especially the phosphate that goes into them. So when you bring this battery over to North America, everything has to change in the way that it's produced, because it just wouldn't be acceptable on an environmental level as it is over there.
Now, your company, First Phosphate, has found a reserve in Quebec of phosphate, and you plan on mining it, exploiting it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really fascinating part of this story. So, under the Inflation Reduction Act, it says that, by 2026, about 80% of all battery materials need to be sourced within North America. So you look at phosphate, and it's a real problem. The problem with phosphate is the amount of phosphate being mined out of the ground has decreased dramatically in the last 20 years in North America, and also the amount of phosphoric acid that's produced. So when you have the phosphate, when you purify it, it's called phosphoric acid. You'll find phosphoric acid in the can of Coca-Cola. So it says acid. It's not a bad thing, but
phosphoric acid is in Coca-Cola.
Phosphoric acid is in Coca-Cola. It's in paints. It's in your electronics. It's in pharmaceuticals, it's in beverages, it's in foods, it's a food preservative. It's really all over the place. Phosphoric acid is produced from phosphate, and most of that is done right now is mostly in Morocco. There's not so much of it in North America. There is enough in North America for current demand, but it is declining. We've become a net importer of phosphate and phosphoric acid. But with the LFP battery, we're going to need to have more of it. And we're going to need to have more of it inside of North America, not only for the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's such a thing as, just-in-time inventories for auto manufacturers. An auto manufacturer that's building a car in which these batteries now are like, the engine, the combustion system, everything for these cars. It's not like it's even more than an engine, this battery. It's like the whole thing. The rest of the car is just a shell. So it's very important that, they be able to produce these things, on time and with materials that are here sourced locally. So, how do you do that when phosphate's halfway around the world? It could be coming from a problematic region such as, China or Russia. So we're going to need that here at home. So when we look at phosphate, because your question was, phosphate mines in North America, you look at phosphate and there's really two regions in North America where phosphate is found and where it's exploited, and where it's basically extinguishing. The first region is around North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. That's controlled by two companies, Nutrien and Mosaic, and that's sedimentary deposit. It's not very clean. It's great for making fertilizer, but you can't really purify a lot of that up to phosphoric acid for batteries. And then the second area is around Idaho and Wyoming. Again, same type of phosphate, sedimentary. It's got a lot of trace elements, a lot of radioactivity in it. Another thing is when these sedimentary deposits are purified, they leave a lot of gypsum. They leave these big gypsum slag piles, and they're full of radioactive elements in there, like thorium, cadmium, uranium, etc. And you can't do anything with these. You just have to leave these piles inert in the environment. And some of them in the Florida area have already washed into the Gulf during the hurricanes. So, now you look at, batteries. Okay, so, batteries all about, improving the carbon footprint, improving the planet, electrifying the planet. So, what good would it be to make a battery that would be, pollute the environment to make a battery, like it's currently happening now in China, and then put the battery in a Tesla and say, I'm saving the world? That doesn't make sense. So when this process comes to North America, you've got to take care of the environment as you create the battery. So what we've got in Quebec is very special. We've got igneous rock, meaning this is a phosphate that comes from a rock that's, it's like a volcanic, a magma type rock. And the phosphate in this rock is extremely pure. So what that means is that you could almost convert 90% of this into phosphoric acid, whereas with sedimentary deposits, you can only convert 10%. What's even better about this rock, Brian, is that once you're done converting it, the gypsum that comes out is fully recyclable. You can take that gypsum and you can make plaster with it. You can use it as an additive for the cement industry, or you could spread it directly onto fields for a little bit of gypsum added to fields, which is good for agriculture. So that creates circular economy, which is really important for us. And it also doesn't pollute, and it creates new jobs. in the other circular fields. So that's why we're really excited about this. This is really the only other known area of phosphate. There are some other ones, but the only real frontier for phosphate, for clean phosphate, anywhere in North America and perhaps even in the world. And we're sitting on it. And, right at a time when this kind of an element could never be more vital.
Whereabouts in Quebec? How plentiful and how deep?
Okay, so it's in a little area called Saguenay, Quebec. If you know where Quebec City is, which most do, you just travel 2 hours north along the Saguenay River, which is a fjord, meaning it's a very, very deep kind of crevice. And right at the end of the fjord, there's a lake called Lac Saint-Jean, which was, it was a smaller lake, and it's been flooded for a hydro dam there. That's where Alcan's facility is now, the Rio Tinto facility. And so just on the north side of there, there's a rock formation called the anorthosite. It's a Quebec anorthosite. And inside this anorthosite, you find very high oxides, meaning there's very high titanium and iron concentrations. And within those titanium and iron concentrations, you find phosphate. You find phosphate or vanadium. But we found the areas where there's high titanium, high iron, and high phosphate. So it's quite plentiful, but I mean, you have to be looking for the highest grade stuff. So you'll find traces of phosphate in all the rock up there. But what you're really looking for is you're looking to find phosphate that generally would be at about anywhere between 5 and 10% in the ground. So that's kind of what we're aiming at.
And just out of interest, how deep down in the ground is it?
So what's really interesting is you have to think of phosphate as kind of like a bit of a bulky commodity. It sells by the ton. So, rock phosphate right now, igneous source, probably about anywhere between $300 to $400 US per ton. So, you're like, wow, that's expensive, $300 to $400 US per ton, but it's a ton, right? Ton's a lot, right? Like you need a pickup truck to move it around. So this is not like gold where, you can go underground and you come out with an ounce, put it in your pocket, that's worth $2,000. So this is stuff that kind of works almost a little bit like a gravel quarry. If you're not on surface, there's no way you're going to get that out economically. So everything that we look for is always on surface, which is great because, a lot of the work that we did out there, we bought some claims that were from prospectors, but a lot of it was, guys just going around and picking up surface samples and looking at it and testing it on the site and saying, oh, that's got a high percentage, and let's move over 500 feet and let's pick up another sample. And then you kind of start to identify an area. You send that in for sampling. And, generally they say, if you got it on surface, it goes deeper, but the thing is, Brian, these deposits, once they get beyond 200 meters to 300 meters, I mean, it's not even worth going down there because the mine becomes expensive. You got to kind of come up in a big loop with a truck, to get it up to surface. So, you kind of look at stuff that starts on grade, has got very high, I'm missing my words here. It's got very high concentration. And then you hope it goes down to about 100, 150, 200 meters.
Okay, so it's not that deep. It's by Lake Lac Saint-Jean, north of Saguenay. Is it millions of square miles, or hundreds of square miles, or only 5 square miles?
It's quite interesting. You don't really need too much of it. Like it's quite concentrated, right? So if you have a deposit that is deep about 100 to 200 meters, and it runs for a kilometer, I mean, that already makes pretty good mine. But it's about identifying it in the highest concentrations.
Making sure you pick the right spot.
Oh yeah, and then spending a lot of money in drilling through it and making sure that you're happy with what you got, and a lot of laboratory testing.
Oh, this is fascinating. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in 2 minutes and talk a little bit more about critical minerals and infrastructure to get there, and then the company and what the opportunity is. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with John Passalacqua, who is the CEO of a company by the name of First Phosphate. They've got a mine in Quebec, north of La Saint-Jean, Saguenay region in Quebec, that is mining phosphate to turn it into phosphoric acid to produce lithium iron phosphate batteries. And he thinks that's a great opportunity. Let's go through just a couple of questions to give us all a little bit of background, if we could, John. So I interviewed someone that's an expert on critical minerals, and they said things comparable to what you're talking about in regards to batteries, but they went farther and said that the OECD has projected that we need 8 times the number of critical minerals mined in the future as we do today to meet the needs for things like batteries, etc. 8 times increase in mining is unbelievable.
Yes, I mean 8 times. I would think you're underestimating. I think everybody's underestimating. What an initiative this is to sort of electrify the world. It's a great concept, and it's one that we definitely have to move to. But I don't think we're going to be able to do it, as quickly as some of the projections want us to be, and some of the targets would like us to be. One of the big problems is we have to have resources, and we have to have resources within the Western world, and it takes a long time to get a mine going in the Western world. On the low side, it's 3 years, and on the bad side, you're looking at 7 years. You're probably always looking, if you do it well, you're looking at about 4 to 5 years, which is what we're looking to do. But yeah, there's long lead times on all of this. Absolutely. So we have to start planning now. And that's what we're doing at First Phosphate.
In addition, this expert was telling me that more than 50% of some of those critical minerals were currently sourced in China. And so therefore, if we think about, how Russia may be holding Western Europe up for hostage, energy hostage, given issues in regards to the Russian-Ukrainian war, and we're worried about China in the future. Geopolitical reasons are reasons why we should want some, if not a lot more, of these mines to be in Canada, or at least in Western countries. What do you think of that?
Well, I think first off, I think again that's an underestimate when you're saying 50% of these minerals are in China. I mean, in some industries, I mean, if you're looking 70, 80, 90% is in China. It's not that they're actually being mined in China, right? It's that minerals that are being mined in other parts of the world, somewhere in Indonesia, Australia, Africa, South America, but even North America. These minerals are making their way to China, where they're then processed, right? And the reason that they're being processed in China, believe it or not, is because they're the only ones who can process it on such a low environmental scale and get away with it. Like, you wouldn't be getting away with processing these minerals in the rest of the Western democracies in that kind of way. But the big hypocrisy is that we've completely gutted our entire, mining sector and our industries in these Western countries because we want it to become green. But we still continue to consume the products that these minerals are made from, and they're all made in China. So, we've given away our industry to China. China continues to process it in the way that we used to, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And then they sell it back to us. So we really haven't accomplished anything. And I think we've all just kind of woken up to this. I mean, I've woken up to this for sure. So, what is the solution? I think, Brian, the solution, you said, yes, we have to be able to mine in our own countries. And everybody's gotten used to not having mines in our countries, and and they're messy, and when we need to do them in a certain way. So obviously the solution to this is not to go back to doing it the way that they're doing it in China and start repolluting the Western world. But again, pollution is a global thing anyways, right? But at least not polluting here at home, but finding ways to bring our industry back home, being able to find social compromises where we can have mines here in our countries, but these mines also have to be done properly, right? They have to be done by proper environmental standards, and they have to provide employment, and they have to be, at the same time, very considerate of, local populations and environmental and everything else in our countries. But, it's going to be more expensive, right? Because it's, in the beginning, it's going to be more expensive. I think in the end, it gets cheaper because we figure better ways of doing it. But it's a big adjustment curve here, and we all got to kind of wake up to this reality, or it certainly is not going to happen.
In Ontario, a lot of us have been hearing about the Ring of Fire for, it seems like, decades and decades, and not much, if anything, from an infrastructure standpoint has happened. Tell me about the Saguenay and Lac-Saint-Jean. Is there infrastructure there such that you can actually get to the mine, develop it, and ship the product out?
Yeah, I think that's another really big problem in our Western countries and democracies is, I wouldn't call it a problem. I would just call it the way it is, right? When you're in China and you're in Russia and the government wants to do something, they can mount $1 billion, trillion, maybe even, and put in bridges, put in roads, build infrastructure, build mining facilities, displace populations. There's no need for environmental assessments. There's no reason to consult with the population. And you can get a mine up and going in 1 year. People would say, wow, that's success in terms of, Machiavellian ability to realize an objective. But in our countries, it's different, right? And even infrastructure spend is very controlled. It's not just one person that agrees to it. There's a whole process to go through it. So building new infrastructure in our countries is very different. It's very difficult. Ring of Fire, you run into that, right? There's Indigenous rights out there as well. There's, to access the Ring of Fire is, I've looked at that a little bit, just the road work and the bridges that are required and environmental studies to do that. And, making sure that it doesn't affect habitat, because there's a lot of, very traditional Indigenous communities out there. So, when we look at that and we move into the Saguenay region of Quebec, there is a lot of good infrastructure up there. There's a lot of good provincial highway. There's a lot of logging. So some great logging roads. I mean, one of our properties is right by the logging road. The logging road is cleared, 365 days a year. So that's helpful. The other thing is, there's bridges across rivers. It is a very developed industrial area. Rio Tinto, which was the old Alcan's, been there for almost about 100 years. The Indigenous groups in the area, for the most part, are very cooperative and pro-development. They're also fairly well-to-do and very involved in the business community. It's a real pleasure to work with them. I can say that. Very culturally in tune, and so it's we're okay in the Saguenay, but one of our strategies that has been our real strength is we've tried to stick to properties that are very close to infrastructure, as opposed to, going a little bit further out, maybe having a bigger deposit, maybe a little bit higher grade or whatever it might be. But now you're into building $500 million to $1 billion of infrastructure, and you can fight all day, hoping that investors will put some in and the federal government will chip some in, the provincial government. Well, what happens if they don't, right? What happens if you don't get to that kind of accord? So we're really sticking to, where the infrastructure is, where are the hydro lines, how do we get to gas? Like everything we do is really based on, ear to the ground kind of thing, and really grounded in reality. And sometimes for us, it's, we're not going after the best and the highest grade deposit if necessary, but we're going towards the most feasible one, right? And sometimes you got to kind of like into your input decisional matrix, you got to plug in 10 elements. Traditionally we always used to plug in the element of, where's the most gold? Where's the highest grade, for instance, if you're looking for gold. But I think as we start moving forward, that's no longer the case. The case is, where is it easiest to develop this? Where am I going to get the best buy-in from the population? Where am I going to get the best support from government, from the Indigenous groups, from, where can I find local people to staff the project, right? Because that's a big problem too. There's not enough people to staff projects anymore. Truck drivers, heavy machinery, skilled workers. So it's a big, complicated matrix that you're working yourself into. But we're really happy with the Saguenay. We feel it's great. There's an airport very close. There's rail lines. There's roads. There's a good educated population out there. It's Canada's 6th largest city. It's like a little pristine oasis out there in the Saguenay. It's got a very distinct, very, very, very proud culture. It's very, very, very old Francophone culture, very deep Indigenous culture. It's very integrated. Everybody gets along. And we've been so well accepted out there that, we see that as a real nice addition for people that would also come in from outside to be able to work there, is the fact that there's a great community to live in.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And you're also not the first company in that area. I understand there's other companies mining phosphate that have already been established and have got Quebec government support. Is that correct?
There's nobody mining phosphate just yet. There's a couple other projects that they've been at it a little bit longer than we have. They have a different business model and different focus than we have. But yes, there are 2 other established projects up there that have gone through permitting. They have not gone to mine life yet, but yes, there is a.
What are they mining if not phosphate?
So there's a lot of mining in the area. The two I talked to you about, they're going to be mining phosphate hopefully at some point. But the other elements that are mined out in that area are vanadium, niobium, and a few other little rare earth minerals. There's a lot of gravel quarries. There's a lot of staking right now of lithium claims, a lot of staking of iron claims, other types of rare earth materials. But really predominantly right now, the only thing that's mined in that one area is niobium.
So tell me a little bit about First Phosphate. How long have you been around, and are you only operating in this area?
So First Phosphate has been around in this iteration for about 6 months. We plan to be a pure play company in phosphate. That was our direction since the beginning. And we wanted to be only in one area. We don't want to be one of these companies that, is into 10 different minerals all over the world. Sometimes you find a company's got a mine in Australia and there's exploring in Labrador. They've got something else in Utah. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think you got to be focused on one commodity. You got to know that well, and you got to be the best in the world. And you have to have a deposit. You have to focus on a deposit that's going to have a true, meaningful, competitive advantage within North America and within the world. And that's what I think we got here. We got the competitive advantage because we're in phosphate, and phosphate is rare in North America, and it's going to be very needed for the battery industry. And we're sitting on, the purest phosphate that you can find anywhere in the world. And also, we're into one specific area where all the phosphate is the purest, which is Saguenay. So I'm really comfortable about, our strategic advantage, and I want to stick to that.
And when do you think you'll start mining?
Well, it's a long road. So right now we have one property that's completed what's called a 43-101, which is a sort of a resource estimate, kind of outlays, how many tons you have in the ground. That's 49 million tons of phosphate at 5%. It's another same 49 million tons with of titanium is in there at about 4%, 4.25%. And then there's also some heavy iron in there, about 20% iron. So that's established with the 43-101, that resource. And now we're going to move to the second stage of that, which is called a PEA, a preliminary economic evaluation. And what that does, basically, it starts to lay out the economics around the project. What can you expect to make? How can you mine it? Where would the roads go? Where would the concentration facility go? And then once you have a PEA, after that, you move to a feasibility study, which sort of tightens that up a lot more, and you kind of get some numbers that are bankable. So that's one property. We have about another 12 to 14 properties in the area. Like Brian, our strategy was to cover everything off between the port and another company that has a phosphate project called Darien Phosphate, which is 320 kilometers away from the deep sea port. We covered off every single known claim of phosphate that we thought was indicative or could have something between that port and that other company. And what we're doing right now is we're just trying to see where the best properties are. So we've worked hard, and we identified another property called Bégin-La-Marche, which is only about 80 kilometers from the deep sea port, our other property being 140 kilometers from the deep sea port. So this one at 80 kilometers from the deep sea port has got, just for now, surface samples. We're going to be drilling it soon. We found, 2 to 3 times the grades of phosphate that have been found anywhere in that area. So we're very excited about that, but that's sort of more of an exploration play. So the next step on that is to drill that in the coming months here, see what that's like, and then we would push that into a 43-101 and eventually into PEA. Our idea is to have 2 or 3 different areas where you can potentially have phosphate mines, and then make a decision so that we're building a bunch of smaller little mines that are not as impactful. They're closer to the urban center and closer to the deep sea port, so that our infrastructure development is minimized and our ability to access the port is at a maximum, where we save on transportation costs. And we have mine lives that could go on for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Right now, what we've proven out is a mine life of about 12 to 15 years at La Colonial, which is the one going into PEA. But I'd like to have a couple properties so that you could have 50 years of phosphate by doing that. and then you've got a real resource that is sustainable and something that could really be seen as
And when do you think
viable.
the first shipment gets sold to a customer? How many years from now?
Well, we're already preparing a bulk sample, which is going out to a potential off-taker. And also, that is being used to create phosphoric acid to do some testing to see, how viable the concentrate is to make phosphoric acid. We already know that it is, but you got to dot the I's and cross the T's on this stuff. So you could already say that we're starting to test sort of customer type setting, but actually getting the mine into production and shipping. I mean, I would hope between 3 to 5 years, probably closer to the 4 to 5, but not any later than that. But we don't know how these things go. We're just at the beginning of it.
Sounds like a fascinating opportunity and really quite exciting. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about the team that's behind this opportunity, and then maybe delve into batteries and some of the other uses of phosphate and phosphoric acid. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're talking tonight about mining, specifically phosphate in Quebec, in the Saguenay, Lac Saint Jean area. Our guest is John Passalacqua, who is the CEO of First Phosphate. It's a company operating in Quebec, in the Saguenay. You've only been around for 6 months, you say, John. Tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into mining phosphate for First Phosphate?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd asked me, Brian, like 8 months ago, if I was going to be a CEO of a company and on this show tonight talking about phosphate, I would have told you you're absolutely insane, and I probably would have been dead wrong. That was like, that's like getting struck by lightning. So what happened was, I'm an investor. I run a small family office, and we've been caught in investments. We've been caught in investing in good projects, but poor management teams, or great management teams, or in poor projects. So when I saw this opportunity, I just saw such a moat around it, such an important piece of property, and something that could be so valuable that I didn't want to take a chance on, having other managers run it. So, we sat down, a couple of my business partners and myself, and we decided to run this ourselves. So we financed the company ourselves to start, and we're running it ourselves. And, it takes a lot out of us, but it was the right thing to do because we've been able to really execute on the vision that we set out since the beginning.
That's a pretty gutsy move.
I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? It's gutsy in the sense that, I've run companies before. I run my own company. I've got a lot of background in that. It's just a lot of work for me, right? It takes me out of my comfort zone, and I thought I wouldn't like it, but I'm actually loving it. And the reason I'm loving it is I just found such great empowerment in being able to execute a vision and not have somebody in between me and the vision. And it is a lot of work. I mean, if I wish I could change that, but you can't change it. You can't get everything in life. But I'm really enjoying just the ability to execute this vision. I just see such a tremendous, powerful vision for this company, and we're just charging. We're just moving so darn fast. And knock on wood, to date, I think we've moved pretty accurately. You're never going to do everything perfect, but you can attain an 80 to 90% chance if you really have your heart in it, and you're working hard, and you're working with good values and good people.
In some of your prior investments, have you been in the mining business previously?
I've been mostly a technology guy, and so when I looked at this story, I just saw a battery. I didn't really see a mine. I figured, okay, we'll learn mining as we go along, and we stacked ourselves with really great mining people all around us. And in fact, we're probably so robust on the mining side because of the reason that we had fear that we didn't necessarily know the mining business as good as the other aspects. But what makes it really special is that I'm focused downstream. I'm focused on the battery. I'm focused on the technology client. I'm focused on where this material needs to end up in the form that it needs to end up and what it needs to do. And I think that's powerful because a lot of times you get somebody with a mine, they're just pulling stuff out of the ground, but they don't know how it gets into the next process and how it ends up going down the value stream. So what we've been able to do because of that is, we're working on a model of vertical integration where we take the phosphate out of the ground and we're going to end up with a bag of cathode active material, which is the powder that goes into a battery.
So you're going to be doing the processing as well.
We're going to be taking it to two extra levels here and capturing all the value add. And by the way, that's the way the fertilizer companies have become these massive billion-dollar companies. Is, if you look at somebody like Mosaic or Nutrien in the US, they start with a mine and they get you right to a bag of fertilizer in the store. So, we're gonna go from the mine right to a bag of cathode active material. It's not going to go in a store, but it's going to go in a battery. Where are you
going to do that processing in the Saguenay area as well, or you're going to process it somewhere else?
What's really interesting about that, Brian, is that when you're creating this cathode active material, it's very sensitive material, and nobody appreciates it. All the guys talking gigafactories all day long, they're never talking about logistics on the ground. But the truth of the matter is, the more that you can concentrate things into one area and not have to move around supplies, because A, they're expensive, and B, they contaminate, right? And it's all about purity. When you're into the battery, it's high levels of purity. Otherwise, there's fires. There's multiple things that can go wrong. So the more we can concentrate in the Saguenay region, the better. Now we're up against things like, in the US, they're giving out a lot of subsidies to go down there. So we'll have to look at that. But hopefully our government can come around and, do what they've done in the US and provide, good ecosystem and good subsidy system to get companies to those higher levels of value add. And then we can keep the value add here in Canada, in Quebec, and keep it all in one spot and do it properly. Like, I truly do believe that the Saguenay region of the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region of Quebec, Canada, could become the LFP battery valley of North America. And I do truly believe that First Phosphate can be the company to anchor all of that. That's how powerful this vision that I'm holding is. And that's the vision that I'm going after here. I'm going to need help. I'm going to need help from the community. The community is like all over us. We're really having it really good out there. We're treating them well. They're treating us well. With a little bit of government vision on this, I truly do believe you've got an LFP battery valley up in Saguenay, Quebec, because all the elements are there.
I understand that the chair of your board is a former Minister of the Environment.
Yes, that's the Honorable Peter Kent. He was Minister of the Environment under Harper's government.
That's got to be a big win for you to get a Minister of the Environment or a former Minister of the Environment as your chairman of the board.
Well, I think it's a win on a few levels. I think it's a win because Peter's such a humble man, and he's a bit of a mentor to me, and he calms me down, and he's always got the right responses, and he helps me out with government. As you know, government is sometimes hard to figure out. So, if I go to him a little bit agitated, why is this not happening? That's not happening. He's like, okay, this is the way it works. Slow down, right? This is not business. And he'll explain it, and he'll scenario plan, and he'll work us through that. But above all, he's very, very humble, very, very sane, very, very wise in his judgment. He's a great, he's been an anchor man as well. So he's a great anchor for the company. He's a great spokesperson for the company. He's like the ambassador for First Phosphate. He keeps us clean on the ESG side. He's very big on environmental social governance. And so it's a very strong sign to our investors that Peter's overlooking that. Like, if I tried to cut a corner, not that I would, Peter would be the first guy to say, no, you know what, you got to respect what you set out to do, which is, to produce the batteries, but to produce them in the proper way, that they're actually contributing to the solution and not part of, a part of the problem, like they might be in China. Some of these batteries in China, I mean, if you had to look at all the waste and all of the deleterious sort of toxicity that goes into making these batteries, you're better off to just keep driving your combustion fuel car, So we don't want to do that. We want to do that properly. And so Peter's guiding that vision around the environment. We're very thankful to have him on the board. Absolutely.
And you really think that electric cars are going to take over?
Look, are they going to take over? I could certainly tell you that they're being mandated, right? Like in the EU, there's policies, but by certain dates, a certain amount of vehicles have to be off the road, or they have to be all electric, or you can't drive them anymore. That's going to be a problem because we're not going to hit those targets. There's no way, and I don't know what they're going to do. But even here, I believe the other day that Parliament passed a rule. I think it was my numbers are escaping me. By 2025, a certain percentage of cars had to be electric. Like they actually are being mandated to produce them electric. So, would this happen on its own? Probably not as fast. But the governments are really they're really tight on this net zero and getting there by 2050 and working on it. And I think that's a good thing, because I think as humans, all we can do is try. Just because we don't get there by 2050 or by 2030, 2040, whatever they want, it doesn't mean that planet's going to go up in a plume of smoke. But it's great that we're working towards this. It's great that this humanity has assumed, at least in the Western world, we assume this collective consciousness of trying to improve our situation, right? Trying to end wars, trying to end suffering, trying to end pollution, suffering of the planet, right? Like the Pachamama, as they say down in Peru, like protect our Mother Earth. So it's good. It's good. We're going to get there.
It's interesting. A little while ago, I interviewed both the VP at General Motors as well as a CEO of a big environmentalist agency, and both of them said the single biggest things Canadian just people can do if they want to improve the environment is buy an electric car. And the rationale they said is because you buy an electric car, then smart car companies are going to start building a lot more better, cheaper electric cars. And smart guys like you are going to go out and try to figure out how to get batteries and other things. And so government incentives are one thing, but consumer demand for things that are better for our climate are the things that are going to have the biggest impact on our carbon situation.
Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, I don't know if you watch your kids, but I certainly watch my kids, and I go to their assemblies, on Fridays. I mean, it's all talk about getting to net zero. Like, I mean, whether we like it or not, our kids are just coming up like an army, and they're conscious of it. And so, we need to move with it, and we need to give them the opportunities. I mean, there's no kid's dream out there. If you asked any kid, in grade 4 or grade 5, what is their dream? None of them have a dream of creating a combustion engine. They're all talking about, I don't know, an app, or they're talking about, making a battery or something like that. They're going to move us. Their consciousness is way beyond ours.
Now, you say all you think about is batteries, but I thought one of the nice things about your mind is that you've got an agricultural use as a base, a chemical use, is it not? Or are you going to be all just batteries?
Well, so here's the situation, Brian. So there's about 15 to 20 companies out there worldwide in the phosphate space that trade on an exchange somewhere in the world. And when you look at these companies, all of them, other than First Phosphate, are almost completely into the fertilizer space. So they're into phosphate. They're into sedimentary phosphate and not necessarily igneous. Very few are into igneous because it just doesn't exist, right? The purity that we have it. And then most of them are into the fertilizer business. A few of them are talking about batteries here and there, but they're mostly in the fertilizer business, and most of them are outside of North America, which they don't meet the IRA Act. But what I'm trying to say here is that why are they into fertilizer? Well, this is a really important fact. That's where phosphate used to be, right? And that's where it still is. Phosphate is still going to be 95% of phosphate is still going to be fertilizer. If 5, maybe 10% of it becomes a battery by 2030, by 2040, hallelujah. But it's still going to be a game of fertilizer. Fertilizer is going to be the majority of the uses of phosphate. Now, the thing is, these companies that are using sedimentary deposit to purify phosphate, like I said, they can only purify up about 10, 15, maximum 20% of it to purified phosphoric acid. The other 80, 90% has to stay back in the fertilizer stream. Well, so what does that tell us? If 80 to 90% of your business is in fertilizer, you're a fertilizer company. These companies cannot become LFP focused, lithium iron phosphate focused companies, right? But us, we can, because we're sitting in igneous rock. So igneous rock, we can scale up 90% of that to purified phosphoric acid, which is for the battery. And then we have only a small little, 10% stream that stays back for fertilizer, which is, meaningless to the company. It is easily sold on the fertilizer market without, that's something we would not even bother with, right? We would just sell it for whatever it's worth, and just to sort of be able to focus on the LFP battery. So we have this elite positioning with this igneous phosphate rock in Quebec, where we can be focused, almost 100% on the lithium iron phosphate battery. So what does that mean? And like I said before, I'm a technology guy. It means we can be focused on the client. We can be focused on R&D with the client, making sure that we homogenize properly to their processes. that we're running just in time, that, you know, we're 100% focused on that client. Where some guy selling you, you know, 90% and 95% of their business is fertilizer, they're not going to have the time or the patience or the know-how or the long-term stamina to be able to service a technology client, especially one like an automobile manufacturer who needs, you know, just-in-time phosphoric acid. They're not going to take it when, you know, the CEO of one of these companies comes out and says, well, you know, we've had a bad year in fertilizer this year and we got to focus on it, so we're going to cut out, you know, the LFP battery supplies. You know, what's the auto manufacturer going to say? You know, we have no more cars here. So they need somebody who's focused. They need a mind that's focused just on that. And that's where I think we get them all, is that we're, you know, focused on the lithium iron phosphate battery 100%. We're focused on quality. We're focused on ethical source. We're focused on, you know, the ESG side of it, which is, you know, the cleanliness of it. Because fertilizer operations don't need to have the same kind of environmental custody that we have. It's food. Everybody needs it. They can get away with a less pure product, but we can't. We have to have the best environmental footprint, the best environmental practices, and the cleanest, the traceable, sourceable, and available, and inside of North America.
John Passalacqua, CEO of First Phosphate, thanks for educating us on phosphate, iron, lithium batteries. Really appreciate the education about your mine, etc. It's going to be an exciting opportunity. We're going to take a break and come back with some final comments in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I'm chatting tonight with John Passalacqua, who is the CEO of First Phosphate. And we're talking about, lithium iron phosphate batteries coming from a phosphate mine in the Lac-Saint-Jean area of the Saguenay in northern Quebec, or central Quebec, I guess, north of Quebec City. And it's pretty exciting. John, you're a private company today, correct?
Yes, we're private. We shall be public in about a week or two. We will be trading under the ticker symbol PHOS, PHOS, like phosphate. And what's your vision?
Well,
our vision is to be able to create the lithium iron phosphate battery central of North America in Saguenay, Quebec. We want to go from mine to phosphate concentrate, to purified phosphoric acid, to creating cathode active material, which is the material that goes into the cathode of the battery, of the lithium iron phosphate battery. We want to be able to ship that material to anyone else inside of North America that is looking to make these batteries. We want to be the best, the most secure, most reliable, lowest cost source of that material anywhere in North America. And we want to be able to do that with low carbon footprint and with a very environmentally friendly procedure that will make us the highest grade cathode active lithium iron phosphate cathode active material in the world.
So if you, like me, believe in climate change, believe that electric cars are going to be needed to solve some of those problems, and demand for them are going to go up dramatically, that batteries are one of the biggest challenges in that market segment, you're going to be the supplier of those batteries in a high quality, and from Canada, from Quebec, not from China or some other place. And so that there's geopolitical reasons to support you. There's domestic economic reasons to support you. There's potentially a good stock market reason to support you. It sounds like an interesting company.
Thank you.
Well, that's one interesting story for today with John Passalacqua, who is the CEO of First Phosphate, going public in a couple of weeks. Sounds exciting. And I'm going to be going checking out where your first batteries are going to be, what cars, because that's going to be exciting to see them actually going down the highway.
Thank you very much, Brian. Very much appreciated.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from the Saguenay, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.